Welcome to Entanglement Radio, transcendent talk for the conscious mind. Join us for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science, new thought, and conscious healing. Explore the potential and infinite possibilities of what it means to be human with some of the best guests in radio. At Entanglement Radio, it is all connected. Now, here is your host, Angela Levesque, on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Good day. You're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on IOM.FM. I'm coming to you live today from the beautiful foothills of the Rocky Mountains here in Boise, Idaho. I am very happy to be back. I took a 2-week hiatus as I traveled in France with my family, and it was just a wonderful vacation. And I am a big proponent of being as unplugged as possible while on vacation, so I decided not to do my show. So I hope you enjoyed the rebroadcasts that were played. I have a very interesting topic for you today. We have Reverend Dr. Sharon Tate on the program, and we are talking about the rise of the sacred feminine. And even more, we're going to take it a step further than that and talking about sacred feminine liberation theology. And if you're sitting there listening thinking, what does that mean? Well, we will get into that more in just a moment. Next week, we have Stacy Couch on, and we will be talking about how we connect with our spirit animals. She has a very interesting story of her own journey connecting with these messengers of spirit, and we will help you guys out there listen and learn about how you can do that yourself. If you need to get a hold of me at any time during the week, you can email me at angela@hestiahealth.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter, either at Hestia Health or at Entanglement Radio. And if you go to my website, you can also sign up for my newsletters so you can find out more about upcoming guests, blog posts, articles, and just cool little tidbits that I find here and there on the internet. And so you can also do that at hestiahealth.com. So as I said, we are going to be talking about the rise of the sacred feminine. Many people think that this is exactly what is happening, or at least some people think this is what is called for in this time of strife and violence and all of that. But like I said, we're going to take it a little bit further because, you know, myself, my very first dog I ever had, I named her Gaia. And then my cat's named is Magdalene, and I call her Maggie for short. And my company is Hestia Health, and those are all goddess. And I've always been connected and to the energy, and I've learned a lot from studying the archetypes of goddesses. But we are talking about something more than that today. How we take all of this beautiful energy and teaching and wisdoms of the goddess, and how we take that and put it into our life and help change things around. Because many of you know that this has been a patriarchal society for a very long time, and there has been certain outcomes from that, which we're going to talk about at the beginning of the program. And then what can we expect to see when we shift into and embrace more of the sacred feminine, and what that actually looks like. So in a sense, today we are going to be bridging politics and spirituality, and I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. So with that, let me introduce my guest. Reverend Dr. Sharon Tate is a 4-time published author, speaker, radio host, and sacred tour leader and social justice activist. Her long-running radio show, Voices of the Sacred Feminine, can be found on Blog Talk Radio. Dr. Tate has been named one of the 13 most influential women in the goddess spirituality movement and a wisdom keeper of goddess spirituality. She's been seen in the influential documentary Femme, Women Healing the World, and the titles of her books include Goddess Calling, Inspirational Messages and Meditations of Sacred Feminine Liberation Theology, Voices of the Sacred Feminine, Conversations to ReShape Our World, Walking an Ancient Path, Rebirthing Goddess on Planet Earth, and Sacred Places of Goddess, 108 Destinations. So there is no one better to talk about this than Dr. Reverend Sharon Tate. I just want to welcome you to the program today. I feel very honored and blessed to have you on today. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much, Angela. I'm feeling really good today, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Well, you know, I'm excited to talk about this because, as I said in my little monologue there, I think there's so many of us, especially women, that are very connected to the goddess energies, the archetypes. But you're kind of wanting us to take it a little step further. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Because for a long time, and I guess saying a long time, that's really relative. Let's say in the last few decades, the idea of a sacred feminine has come alive. Feminists took what was swept beneath the rug and brought it out, or tried their best to bring it out into the mainstream world. And we discovered that there were really feminine faces of God. In fact, people are surprised. I know I was, because I grew up in the Bible Belt. People are surprised to discover that humanity was actually revering a feminine face of God 30 to 40,000 years ago. But that was either disregarded or marginalized, because of our patriarchal culture. You look at the Demeter and Persephone reverence in ancient times. Those goddesses were worshipped for thousands of years, but do you ever hear anything about that? No, it's sort of just disregarded, because it doesn't fit into the agenda of today's patriarchal culture. And I think it's important to go back, to know that there's, historic precedent for what we're talking about today. It isn't something that's just been conjured up recently, as if it were a feminist fantasy or, something so that women could feel good about themselves.
It's interesting. As I was putting together my notes for this, I wanted to say, it's time for a sacred feminine revolution. But even as I'm using it, and I was thinking maybe spiritual coup or something, but even the words like coup and revolution, the connotation behind that is violence and war and strife and this really like catastrophic overthrowing of things. And that, so I want to talk for a minute, as that made me pause and think about all the things that this patriarchal, and I don't know necessarily if this is how it begun or if this is just the result of the patriarchal society, but that there is this undercurrent of violence and war. What are some of the other results of this patriarchal society that we live in?
Okay, well, first let me address what you first said, how militaristic and violent a revolution or a coup sounds. I understand where you're coming from there. So I would replace revolution or coup with the word evolution. We need to evolve. We have to awaken. We have to uplift ourselves. So I think those, I think those are some of the words that we can use. And, what are some of the results of our living in a patriarchal society for so long? Well, there is a laundry list. I think the things closer to home are the fact that, women only make 70 cents on the dollar. There's domestic violence. You have, white Christian men in Congress who think that they can determine a woman's fate. She can't determine her own reproductive health. You have, fortunately, we're starting to look at it closer, but this domestic violence across the board. I mean, even Jimmy Carter wrote a book recently about how, women are held back from reaching their fullest potential by religion. He even left his church because of it. You have infanticide, you have bride burning, you have an assortment of things around the world that women suffer because they are considered, second-class citizen, that men are superior. They're the ones that are supposed to be calling the shots, that women are basically supposed to be submissive and in service to the male gender. And, I don't think it was really ever intended to be that way. In fact, if Christians, don't just believe everything they believe that they hear from the patriarchal pulpit these days, and they actually do research themselves. They would find that, Jesus wasn't perpetuating a patriarchal agenda. In fact, that's why in the early days, Christianity was the liberation theology of its time. Women felt like they had a place. The poor felt like they had a place. Slaves felt like they had a place. But then things shifted, and these people became, sort of shoved off to the side, and, Christianity evolved into something that really wasn't about liberation. It was about domination and control as well. So maybe I've rambled a little bit there.
No,
but
I think that, you touched on some really important points, because I imagine there's going to be some people listening to this that are uncomfortable with what you're saying. And I'm glad that you made the distinction, saying that the original teachings of Jesus weren't inherently anti-woman, and that it somehow things through man got misconstrued. But do you find that most people connect with that message, or do you find that there's still some serious agitation that comes out of that?
Well, I think it depends on where you live. I hate to put it that way, but I'm talking from an American perspective. I grew up in the Bible Belt of New Orleans, and when I lived in that Bible Belt, I lived in a bubble. And you never heard anything but the agenda that, was of that was the same agenda of everyone around you. Nothing ever penetrated the bubble. And I know for a fact that my evangelical family thinks this is crazy, thinks I'm going to burn in hell. They are not open to new ideas. It would force them to challenge too much of what's familiar. It would challenge them to use critical thinking, and it's easier to not do that. But I know for myself, when I left Louisiana and the Bible Belt and I moved to California, I have to tell you, a whole new world opened to me. I was not afraid to have intellectual curiosity and learn and research and delve into these things. And it changed my life. In fact, it refocused, I think, my entire path. And I felt so strongly about this new information. And I have to say, I felt angry, too, at first, because, for the first 30 years, I knew nothing about this. What a brainwash. And and that word might sound harsh too, but, it is important to the powers that be, to the status quo, that they keep people thinking in a certain way to protect the people who are in charge, to, keep the people who are in authority. Look at Fox News and all the disinformation that comes out of Fox News. It doesn't matter that it's not true. It's all fed to people in a certain way so that certain agendas, can be achieved. And, so I guess, to go back to your question, more and more women and men, and I want to stress that, and men, understand that the values of the sacred feminine are exactly what's missing in the world. And you know what? Whether you want to put a label on it and call it sacred feminine values, or you just want to call it a more fair and balanced society, or a society of caring and sharing and equality and justice. You call it whatever you want, but it's the idea that if you do want to reconcile your spirituality and your politics, then it's the sacred feminine values that really do represent what's missing in the world and what could, diminish the suffering that so many are subjected to these days.
Well, yeah, it's a tough conversation, and I know because I come from a very strong religious family as well, and it's really hard to be able to open up and have these conversations with an open mind, because I don't think we realize how much of what we're taught feeds into our worldview. And, one example is, and I wanted to ask you about this, the feminist movement, in the past couple of years, we've allowed women in combat. And many people are saying, yay, that's amazing that women are in combat. And I think that there is, this drive that we want equality. And at the same time, it's like we are attempting equality by standards determined by this patriarchal society, right? Like I don't think that women should not be allowed to do it, but at the same time, I don't believe that the world, and this is my personal opinion, I don't believe that the world needs more soldiers.
Right.
We need more mystics and, artists and nurturers and lovers. And so how do you feel about that?
Well, I agree with you. You're probably the first one that's actually asked me this, but, I think you're right in the sense that, this is patriarchal's answer to female authority. Well, yeah, the women want equality, then let's put them on the front lines. We'll show them what equality is. You kind of have that feeling. But yeah, I mean, this idea of militarism, well, that's a part of patriarchy. In a sacred feminine world, we would be doing more negotiation and using less bullets and bombs. We would be creating win-win situations so that we don't have winners and losers, dominators and oppressors. And I know that might sound Pollyanna to some people, but you have to start somewhere. You look at a lot of these countries around the world that are in strife right now. These are people who have no hope. These are people who have no economies in some sense. They have nothing. So what do they, they have no jobs. They have no education. So yeah, they become terrorists. And I'm not saying that lightly, don't get me wrong. But if the world's resources were more adequately distributed, because we have enough resources. I mean, I will never forget seeing Bill Clinton on David Letterman one night talking about this very subject. There is enough so that people around the world don't have to live in poverty. And I think as soon as you start giving people opportunity and you lift them out of poverty and you provide them with education, then the necessity to control and dominate other people, well, I think it starts to dissipate. It's a long-term project, if you will. I mean, evolution does not go quickly. I mean, you think of a big ocean liner, it's moving along a course and, it doesn't just turn on a dime. Societies and cultures are like that too. You can't just change them overnight. But I think with more opportunity, economic opportunity, with more education, things would change around the globe. Instead of having the wealth held in the hands of a few hundred people, this vast planet, our mother, Gaia, provides all the resources that we need to sustain ourselves. And I mean, some of these ideas might sound radical, but honestly, should we be paying for water? Should we be paying for gas? Should we be paying for the natural resources of the earth? There's a lot of different subjects here, and avenues we could go down, but it's not just patriarchy. I think it's also the predator capitalistic society we live in as well. You look at the austerity that's been forced on so many countries, and at least here in the United States, the stock market is near 18,000, while some kids are still going to bed hungry. You have people working at Kmart, working a 40-hour week, and Kmart tells them we're not going to pay you more, go get food stamps and Medicaid, so that the taxpayer is supplementing the employer's salary rather than Walmart paying them a decent wage. There's a lot of layers to this onion.
Absolutely. But it's interesting because you say in your book, first, if you're just joining us now, we are talking to Reverend Dr. Karen Tate, and she is a 4-time published author. And we're kind of talking about the subject of her book, Goddess Calling, Inspirational Messages and Meditations of Sacred Feminine Liberation Theology. And one of the lines in your book is you said, the goddess is a Democrat. And as I'm listening to a lot of the stuff that you're saying, I think we could look at the Christianity and the part of conservatism, but I also think that many of the stuff that we're seeing now and many of the economic disparity and that stuff that you were saying is inherent in our system that's going more towards being, a corporatocracy rather than a democracy. And I'm not sure that if we, looking at dividing the lines between red and blue, I think that the blue has also taken some steps towards where we are today as well.
Well, yeah, and you can't really just take that one sentence and understand the full scope of what I mean. And so thank you for the opportunity to explain that. So first, let's start with the premise that here in the United States, we only have two parties to choose from. Okay, so if you look at that, and you have to look at the history, do your research, look at the platforms of the two different parties, look at the faces that peer out from you at presidential gatherings when people are gathered. In the Republican Party, all you see are white Christian faces for the most part, and of course, I'm speaking in generalities. There's always the few percentage exceptions, but the vast majority of people are white Christian. They tend to be older. You look at the Democratic, people who get behind Democrats, and it's much more diverse. You have younger people, you have women, you have people of all religions and no religions. You have, people of different skin colors. You have poor people. And why? It's because Democrats historically have had policies that were more for labor, more for workers, more for unions. And I know the spin doctors have made people hate unions, but it was when unions were strong that we had a strong middle class. Now, if you only have two choices, who do you want to vote for? Do you want to vote for the party that is about diversity and about workers, or do you want to vote for the party that's more about, white Christian business owners who, and in a lot of cases, I'm not talking small business owners, I'm talking the Walmart guys, the Koch brothers, the Papa John's, the Monsanto people, those people who are buying our democracy right now. Now, of course, because of Citizens United and the money that's in politics, both sides have to pander to corporate America to have money to run elections. And I will say this, that the Democrats took a corporate turn a while back. That's why, my favorite for the next Democratic nominee is not Hillary Clinton. Her and Bill have been Democratic corporatists. He signed NAFTA, which did not turn out to be a good thing for workers here in the United States. I would much rather have somebody like Elizabeth Warren, like Bernie Sanders, who are not so tied into that corporate structure that is killing the middle class and the American worker. However, let's look at social issues, and that's where the real difference between, I think, Democrats and Republicans lives. You have Republicans who are anti-science, anti-worker, anti-woman, anti-gay, they're sexist, all of these different things. But the Democrats, they aren't. You're not going to find Democrats trying to prevent women from getting an abortion. You're not going to have Democrats voting against women getting equal pay. You're not going to see Democrats across the United States trying to put these religious freedom laws into place to discriminate against gays. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I think you get the point. So there's a difference between social issues and economic issues. But even on the economic issues, while Democrats have to some extent, play the game and get corporate money and do have to pander to corporations to some extent, it's really big on the social issues where there's a difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. So that's why I said, until we have an eco-feminist party, until we have a viable green party, if we only have two choices, then if you're in alignment with goddess ideals, you can't even consider voting Republican. Like one of the people in my anthology said, and I'll just be real quick, Gus Dizarega said, a goddess person can no more vote for a Republican than a Jew can vote for a Nazi. And I know this might be hard to hear, but I think people really have to think about it.
I like it. You're a contentious lady. I have a huge admiration for people who will go to the places that are hard to talk about, because I think that that's what we need to have, these conversations at this time in history. And I think that, the more that people can hear stuff, and if they can just open their heart and calm their minds and hear it, and then, make up their own decision about things. So I admire your willingness to have this conversation. And the funny thing that you said, until we have a viable third party. So I'm actually Canadian. And so in Canada, we have many parties, and there's sometimes where there isn't even a majority at the time, that it's split up enough between the parties of those that were elected that there isn't a majority. So, which I think definitely has its benefits and its drawbacks. But when moving, and I've lived here now in the States for 8 years, the two-party system to me is ludicrous, because you end up doing, just like you were explaining, that, you make these decisions just saying, well, it's kind of the best of two bad choices, and you have to go with that. And that's why I think this conversation, and why I've taken it in the direction that we have, is that I want to talk about, going beyond that. Just, I enjoy feminist archetypes, and I enjoy, learning about the sacred feminine and her energies, and how we go about doing this. But I want to talk about, if there was an eco-feminist goddess party, what would be some of the platform that people would run on?
Well, I think, maybe we can start that by talking about some of the values. I mean, the first values would be equality, whether that's, equal pay for women, or states could no longer discriminate and fire people for being gay. I mean, in some states, people can lose their job for being gay. In some states, gay people can't teach kids in school. I think people would really be surprised if they, if they really knew what was going on around the country from state to state. I think they would be, they would be surprised. So there would be equality, and what that all means. You wouldn't have, this system where, black people are always, getting shot by white policemen. Equality would be for gay people, for women, for black people. It would be for, it would be for everyone. We would try our best to, not have people in a minority status. We certainly wouldn't have all of our laws geared toward benefiting the rich. So that they don't pay taxes, or so that corporations don't pay taxes. We live in a society together, and these corporations benefit from the things that society provides, but yet, they don't want to do their part and contribute to this society. So, we would have fairer tax codes. Everything wouldn't, the burden wouldn't be on the back of the middle class. You wouldn't have the bankers get away with what they just got away with a few years ago when they almost trashed the economy. We wouldn't have these monopolies. I mean, things would be fairer and more just and equal across the board, instead of how things have changed over the years and made it so that all of the power and influence is in the hands of the fewest people. We might really have a representative democracy, instead of this idea that not an idea, instead of literally where it's the people with the most money who have the most influence, and they're the ones that get what they want done in Congress. Rather, the American middle class or the poor, they would have a seat at the table too, and not just the people who can pay for lobbyists. We would be protecting our environment. We would not be allowing these corporations to destroy ecosystems. I come from Louisiana. I know what's happened in the Gulf after that BP spill. They want to whitewash it. You see these great commercials on TV from BP, like they're doing all of these wonderful things and restoring the area. It's not true. I could just go on and on, but you got Monsanto and the bees dying and GMOs, but I think you get the gist. Everything would not be geared for the richest. It wouldn't be geared for corporations. Things would be geared so that everybody benefits, so that there's win-win situations, and we all enjoy the fruits of Mother Earth instead of there being this pyramid, as Riane Eisler talks about, this dominator pyramid with a few at the top dominating everybody down at the bottom where most of us live.
Well, one of the things I want to say, and, I am in your choir for sure. And I think that most of us who are spiritually minded know this. We are environmentalists. We are for social justice. We are for, equal rights. And what I find, though, is that a lot of people who are spiritually inclined are not political. And what I always say is, if there ever was a time for you to get off the bench and get involved in whatever way that is, that time is now. And it is time, in my opinion, to get political and to get active, and I call it sacred or spiritual activism, to go out there, because it's important. Because if we look at it, especially the environmental issues, and you brought up water, and our water is being bought up more and more and more by corporations, like it is now, and so but I know so many people that they want to shy away because they think the energy is bad, or they just don't want to, and I just think, I don't think we have that luxury anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you, and I find women every day who are in goddess spirituality, but they're not all in. They want to do their Wheel of the Year rituals. They want to learn about goddesses. Maybe they even want to go so far as studying goddess archetypes, for personal empowerment, healing, for role models, but they don't take it to that next step that we're talking about, so how do we use this, as a catalyst, as a tool to help us change society? I know, but I can relate, growing up in the Bible Belt, women were sort of taught that, this was men's stuff. Women were supposed to take care of the house and the family, and, they sort of had a secondary job, and, these other things that we're talking about were the domain of men. And I think we still suffer from that attitude a little bit. I will never forget when Hillary was running for president last time around, and a woman was interviewed on TV. And she said, "Oh, no, I couldn't possibly vote for Hillary because women are too emotional." There's so much entrenched ideas and misinformation and lack of education out there. And the mainstream media is not doing anything to help, because they would love to just keep things exactly, the way it is. So, it is difficult, but I think more and more women are becoming engaged. I mean, look at what happened in Texas when, that brave woman stood up there with a catheter so that she could filibuster that, anti-abortion bill that the Texas Republicans were trying to pass in Texas. She stood there for 13 hours filibustering, had a catheter in, because you can't, leave to go to the bathroom. And the State House was filled with women, just out there, chanting and singing and encouraging her on. So, I think my point is more and more women are starting to get it. And I want to stress this isn't just women. This idea of feminism is also about a lot of men out there, which I think the mainstream society either doesn't know or, would have you think, that this is all just stuff that, angry feminist lesbian women want. And, that's crazy talk because the ideas of feminism, they're about caring and sharing and justice and equality, nurturing our interconnectedness, all of this sort of stuff. And I think it just means we have a lot of work to do to continue to educate, to penetrate those bubbles like I used to live in, try to find common ground with these people who just haven't awakened to the new normal. And that's what I like to call it. They have to awaken to the new normal because the old normal, it's not serving the most of us. I mean, it really isn't. And I think the sacred feminine offers us an alternative. These ideas, sacred feminine walks hand in hand with Jesus, to tell you the truth, not the evangelical brand of Christianity, but the Jesus brand of Christianity. So there's common ground to a lot of people with these ideas of social justice and fairness in politics and things like that.
And environmentalism. I mean, I think that is something that can bridge a lot of differences because this is our one planet and we share it. So, inviting that in. And I'm glad that you mentioned that about the male's take on the feminist uprising, because I think that some people might listen to this. And actually, I just want to, because we didn't actually go to our breaks. We have one coming up, but if you're just joining us now, we are talking with Reverend Dr. Karen Tate on Entanglement Radio right here on IOM.fm. But I'm glad that you mentioned that about the men, because I don't want people to feel like we are male bashing. I think that we can have a conversation about the outcomes of having this, patriarchal society for so long, and it not be directly about, we don't like men.
Right. And you know what, Angela? It's really about values we're talking about. And many men revere the values we're talking about, just like many women don't. I was interviewed recently for the Huffington Post, and we talked about, will it be women who save the world, like the Dalai Lama said? Will it be Western women? And I said, you know what? I don't think it's going to be Western women. I think it's going to be ideals of the sacred feminine. And men and women revere those ideals. Because, for instance, you look at people like Margaret Thatcher, Sarah Palin, Michelle Bachmann, most of the Republican women in Congress, Phyllis Schlafly, they're women, but they don't represent the kind of ideas we're talking about. So it's not about the gender necessarily. It's not about the genitals. It's about the ideas. Now, having said that, there's scientific evidence that men and women are different, and maybe we can go into that a little bit if you're interested after your break. But women do come equipped with some innate tools that men don't have that make some of this sometimes a little bit easier.
Well, we have a few minutes before break, so let's go into those right now.
Okay, so just off the top of my head, the rods and cones in our eyes are different. So women actually tend to see peripherally, where men tend to see a little bit more straight ahead, and that translates into our decision making. Women tend to look at, how will my decisions affect the people around me a little bit more than men do. So you have this, and patriarchy has, capitalized on that a lot because, you see so many times that women say, well, I'm not going to rock the boat for the benefit of my family, or what will my family think of me? What will my friends think of me if I start, suddenly thinking differently? How will it affect it's not just about me. I can't just think about myself. You also have this study that was done at MIT that the more successful groups, or not just groups that have the smartest people, but they're the groups that have women in the groups, because women tend to they use that intuition, if you want to call it that. They can read social cues a little bit more. They can sort of sense the energy of what's happening, which sort of, gives them, sort of the inside scoop on, sort of feeling what's happening and, knowing how to proceed forward. Another study that was done at UCLA said when under stress, men and women react differently. Men take flight and women tend and befriend. So if you're the sort of take flight, then you're maybe more apt to, run off to push the button and go to war. Where if you're tend and befriend, well, you're going to say, okay, let's sit down and figure out how we can all come together at the table and negotiate. I mean, even at the UN, big countries like the United States don't adhere to this. But, I've talked to people, who know about this sort of stuff on my radio show. They actually have rules when countries or mediating parties sit down at the negotiation table. They have to have women present because it's more likely negotiation will happen when women are at the table showing the way. And we see in our own Congress where when the women in Congress from both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, they have gotten together and they've actually made progress. I'm sorry about that. Let me turn that down. They've actually made progress where the men haven't been able to. So, women do have, tools in their toolkit, I think, that men don't have. But that's not to say men are incapable of this. I mean, I know incredibly wonderful men who are behind this stuff 100%, and not just a few, but lots of them. I even dedicated a couple of my books to my wonderful husband of 30 years because he's been here, supporting me and all this work that I do, not because I'm his wife or I make him do it, but because he believes in it. And there's lots of men like that.
Absolutely. And going back to what you were saying about we're inviting more of those values in. I know my sister, she works in corporate Canada, and they spend a lot of time talking about emotional intelligence. And I think that is something that can be adopted not only I think it comes very natural to women, but it also can be adopted by men. Well, here's our break. We are talking to Reverend Dr. Karen Tate here on Entanglement Radio. We will be right back after this break.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. FM.
Know what to do, just can't figure out how to fit it all into your busy life? It doesn't have to be that way. Hi, I'm Ellen Baisberg from Seamless Life. Join me every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio and learn the how of conscious living. Let me and my guests help make your life seamless.
Being a radio host on FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Simone Milasas would like you to know that business can be fun, which is why she wrote the book, Joy of Business. What if you could have the joy of business rather than the stress and struggle? Most of the time, the only thing stopping you from a thriving business is you. In the Joy of Business book, Simone gives you access consciousness tools and pragmatic ways to get out of your own way and to create the business, life, and living you know is possible and beyond what this reality says is achievable. Business is joy. It's creation. It's generative. It can be the adventure of living. You can purchase your copy of the book through Amazon or Joy of Business website, www.accessjoyofbusiness.com.
The truth is, you can't change the world if you're broke. I know, I tried. Isn't it time you turned your life's calling into a profitable, freedom-based business? I'm Michelle Barr. Join me every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Sacred Success.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
All right, we are back, and we are speaking today with Reverend Dr. Karen Tate. You're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on IOM.FM. So, Karen, this part of my show is called Bite-Sized Brilliance, and it's brought to you today by Hestia Health, which I think is very fitting because Hestia is also a goddess. But what I like to do in this portion of the program, because we've talked about some pretty big, high-level concepts, I want to take this last segment here to do two things. First, I want to ask you, what are a couple of ways that people who are listening to the show today can invite some more of the sacred feminine energy into their life? And then secondly, I want to ask, what are things that we can do today to help contribute to this movement on a more global scale?
Okay. Well, to invite the idea of the sacred feminine into your life, I'd say, maybe consider a goddess. Is there a particular goddess that calls to you? Maybe if you have a Celtic heritage, it might be Bridget, or, maybe it's Mary or Mary Magdalene, or a Native American goddess, or Kuan Yin, or maybe it's a warrior goddess. If you're feeling angry about all of this and you want to, channel that into, strength and tenacity, maybe it's Sekhmet or Kali or the Morrigan, so find a goddess and study about that goddess and, learn about her values and who she is and, see if her values aren't something that might enhance your life, help you to, empower yourself, heal yourself. So I would start with something simple like that, maybe even create a home altar to this goddess, put a picture of her on your desk or somewhere in your kitchen or, something like that. And as far as what can we do to help, push this paradigm shift, into reality. I mean, first of all, I think we are living in the evolution, I think this is what it looks like because we're making progress out there, even though it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But I would say, we have to get involved. We can't just sit on our couch, doing Facebook, doing Twitter, doing these sorts of things and be passive and distracted. I would say we have to get involved, whether that means educating yourself so that you know who to vote for and not who to vote and who not to vote for, or get out there and actually volunteer. Find a cause that you believe in, whether it's, helping people in poverty, animal rights, fighting GMOs, maybe getting behind, somebody you want that, to get them in office because they represent the values you want to see in your community. I mean, there's so much that needs to be done. And with all this corporate money working against us, we have to counter that with people power. So, the days of just, our citizenship just being we go to the polls once every 4 years, that's done. Or we're going to lose our, I think we're going to lose our country, quite frankly. So we have to get involved and we have to educate ourselves. We can't just, sit in front of the TV. I would say just pick something you're passionate about because that will sustain you. And, get involved and do something and teach your children that they have to be responsible citizens too. Get them involved early.
Yes, that is so important. And I just want to reiterate, because we talked earlier in the program about the values. If there was this, eco-feminist party, what the values would be. And I think that everyone can find a value that they connect with and then find a way to take action on that. And like I said, whether that's being in service of others, whether that's working in the area of social justice and equality or environmentalism. And even if, that idea of politics kind of is off-putting to you, there is still a way to affect change within some of those different categories that I think helps the larger cause. Because I know that for me, I'm quite politically minded, but like I said earlier, there's lots of people that aren't so into that and looking at it from the red-blue perspective. So maybe look at it from the green perspective and you know, help clean up the river or whatever it is.
Or, you know, Angela, I mean, it can be very personal. You know, you live in an apartment complex or down the street from an elderly woman. You know, they're probably living on Social Security. That money doesn't sustain you all month. What if you do something to help that person? You know, these ideas are about caring and sharing and taking care of one another. You know, have your son go cut her grass, bring her a casserole, invite her to dinner, ask her if she needs anything from the grocery store. I mean, we just have to, build community and care about one another and not be so insulated, because we are interconnected, and that's what being interconnected means.
And for the men that are listening today, is there any particular advice that you have for them at this time?
Well, I think if they know about this already, they're probably out there doing some of the very same things. I would say wherever you can, you know, support these causes. And if this is stuff that's new to you, please hesitate to be afraid of it, because we are trying to evolve humanity. All we are trying to do is create a system where there's equality and justice. It's not about hating men. It's not about bashing men. You know, it's about creating a world of sharing and caring. And I think if men start to realize that means we're trying to create a partnership society where women are your partners, I don't know, I think it's kind of hard to thumb your nose at partnership, because that just means, you have more help to make it through life.
So in your perfect world, is there, we talk about shifting towards these sacred feminine values. Is it ultimately that we want to end up in the center where we have this balance or harmony between the masculine or the feminine? And do you feel that we need to kind of like swing the pendulum way to the other side in order to find that place?
You said it perfectly, and that's exactly right. Men, I think, have to understand that sensitive side, that's those attributes that are maybe dormant in them that we might call or label feminine, that those are okay to nurture, that those are okay to express, even though maybe society has taught you that to do that makes you look weak. That's one of the changes that we need, because really all we are trying to do is restore balance, balance within ourselves, so that each of us, whether we're a man or a woman, we can balance our masculine and feminine attributes, because that's the part of women that needs to kind of step up and be a little bit more tenacious and lean in, so to speak, and sort of be out there. So both genders have to balance the masculine and feminine within themselves. And yes, we are just trying to create balance out there in the world, because the pendulum has been swung on the patriarchal side for way too long. We have valued the ideas of greed, of power over, of domination, of control, and look where that has brought the planet. Look at the imbalance, the chaos, the injustice. So if we swing the pendulum back and start to look at how important the values of the sacred feminine are, these values that have not been valued in society, if we look at those and see how their lack has caused the suffering that we have in the world, and appreciate them, then I think we can relax as the pendulum swings back to the middle, and we're in a balanced place, and we don't have to talk about this anymore because we've accomplished it. We've evolved.
I love it. Well, we only have a couple minutes left, and I always like to give my guests an opportunity to share anything they want to leave my listener with: books, social media, upcoming workshops, all of that good stuff.
Okay, well, the best place to reach me, sort of the portal to Karen Tate, is my website, which is my name, Karen Tate. That's Tate with a T.com. If you go there, you can find out about my books, my radio show, any of the presentations I'll be giving soon. But I would like to mention that if you get back to me quickly, if you're interested, we're about ready to close registration on a sacred tour to Turkey. That's for 16 days. That departs at the end of May and into the beginning of June. That's for men and women. If that sounds like something you're interested in, let me know immediately. But just take a look at my last two books, Goddess Calling, Inspirational Messages and Meditations of Sacred Feminine Liberation Theology. It's been called Comfort Food. It's an easy read, short little essays that, you can leave the book in the bathroom and and read it when you make a visit there, or Voices of the Sacred Feminine, which is the name of my radio show as well. The anthology has wonderful essays from an assortment of people, from Noam Chomsky to Starhawk to Rianne Eisler, Michael Eisenberg, Matthew Fox. I could go on. And also my radio show on every week on Blog Talk called Voices of the Sacred Feminine.
And what is the date and time on that?
It's usually Wednesday or Thursday nights, and it's from 6 to 8 p.m. And then after the show, the interviews live in the archives, so you don't have to listen live. And I've been doing it for 8 years. So if you go to Voices of the Sacred Feminine on Blog Talk, you can actually, avail yourself of 8 years of incredible interviews, and 99.9% of them are all still very relevant.
Well, Karen, I want to thank you so much for being on the program with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. Coming up next week, we have Stacy Couch, and we'll be talking about connecting with our spirit animals. You can hear the show every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern on IOM-FM. If you need to get a hold of me, you can email me at angela@hestiahealth.com and find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Hestia Health. This is Angela Levesque wishing you love and light. I'll be here next week. Thanks.